You're listening to Accents, a radio show for literature, art, and culture. I'm your host, Katerina Stoikova, and my guest is poet J.P. Dancing Bear. Hi, Bear. How are you?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Very happy to be talking to you.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to talk to you too.
J.P. Dancing Bear is an award-winning poet, editor, publisher, radio host, translator, outstanding literary citizen, as well as the force behind Verse Daily. His latest book, Of Oracles and Monsters, was published in 2019 by Glass Lyre Press. And I thought that we can start the conversation by you introducing that book to our listeners.
Sure.
What gave you the idea?
Well, it actually started as an ekphrastic poem. There were probably about 3 of them, and they all had to do with oracles. And when I was looking at it, I just started to take in everything that was going on in the world, and the personal reflection that's involved with oracles, and also I'd been listening for like at least a decade. It seems like, but probably it was more like 5 years of. Now I can't think of her name. Oh, this is horrible. She did the float can series or piece. Cassandra Float Can. It's just not coming to me. I don't know why. But she was doing a whole bunch of stuff on Cassandra, and that is obviously one of the major oracles and in Greek literature, and so it just got me thinking about all of the stuff about, how you view the future, how you view the past, and how often we ignore the signs that are around us. So, and this is very much, it's very much a look at today and what's been going on for the last few years, and just a general take on things. I think is probably the best way to put it. I'm sure in 30 years, there will be so many things that were missed, but the truth will be the same as it always is when we kind of close our eyes and allow things to happen.
Cassandra is my favorite oracle. Last year, I took a trip with a group of friends to Turkey, and we went to Troy. And we took a walk through the ruins, and I tried to imagine everywhere I went, where did Cassandra live? Where was Cassandra's place? Where did she give and tell the things that nobody wanted to hear? Who is your favorite oracle in your book?
Well, I too spend a lot of time with Cassandra, and I always have, just because to me it's a fascinating story. I think we tend to oversimplify things when we look at Cassandra, when we look at other oracles as well. But I think what happens is that it's the same with myth, and that's the reason why poets continue to go back and explore myths and archetypes, is because I think a lot of stuff gets glossed over and missed, and the personal feelings and a lot of the personality of these characters is lost. So there's a lot to play with and a lot to fill in, I think, the further you go down in history. And I believe the same thing is true of Shakespeare characters, which were another foil of mine for a long time, because we tend to get the Cliff Note version of characters and not really the depth.
As a translator myself, I need to ask you, how are your translations going? I
really haven't. I haven't done very many of recent. I've kind of returned to focusing to my work. I do continue to look at authors in South America, and I've always been, especially around in the Central America area, I've always been kind of fascinated with the voices that come out of there. Guatemala and Costa Rica, and also Nicaragua. Nicaragua is very interesting because of the political upheaval they had, and just you see the way poets kind of view the fallout of all of that.
In a bio that I came across, it says that you have read all over the United States. Have you read in Kentucky?
I have not.
We need to remedy that. We need to definitely invite you to read in Kentucky. There is adoring audience here, and people who would be really interested in seeing you and meeting you and knowing what you do. So I say things on the radio show Accents, and the universe listens, and that's what I'm going to wish for myself and our listeners, to in not too distant future, to have JP Dancing Bear live in Kentucky reading for us his work.
Okay, I'm game.
So what have you prepared for us to read?
I thought I would start with one of the first poem in the book, and the reason why is because I was fairly honest with the arrangement of this, in that this first poem is the first poem I actually wrote. So we were talking about how it started, and this was Oracle of Trophonius, and Trophonius is more to do with inward seeking and kind of dealing with one's personal downfalls. And it's titled Oracle of Trophonius. Body of hunches and blood-colored robes, body of denied desires, I lowered myself into the oracle's mouth, where she rose from her pool of tears. Voice of black trees, voice of valley light, whispering a warm of quiet spells that chilled and warmed the old flesh. Somewhere I stopped wishing for the changes of others, ceased to need the transformations as a means of making myself content. I was no more happier with this shift, for I became the thing that I needed reshaping. I walked the mists of fog and doubt. I drank the watery moon, but saw no shade or light that was my own. Why is it we want to move the boulders within the caves of ourselves, stones most will never see? She was rising up to the surface. She was rising to spit me out into a fever dream. I ranted and wandered homelessly and begging, not for the charity of others, but for the kindness to myself. And there's a line that James Wright uses in one of his, which is a favorite poem of mine, which starts off with, "How in these dark ages um, can I afford a kindness to myself?" And I just, that poem, it has always been a tuning fork for me. It just resonates throughout. And it always has, ever since the first time I ever read it. Am I just continuing to read, or are we talking?
Yeah, I'm hoping that you read for about 10 minutes for us, whatever you want to share.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
You're doing great.
I'll just keep moving along here then. So there are a lot of poems that are titled Oracle, but there are some, there are obviously, this book is about stuff that's going on in today. So I will read, since we mentioned Cassandra, I'll read this, this poem, The Last Vision of Cassandra. There was always something on the horizon, a fleet of ships. Cassandra could see where trouble and blood, ocean, and a blood ocean, a departure at dawn. She could see the burning, the place where dreams catch a flame, arrow, and reflect their immolations on waves. And when the boiler explodes, a wall in her cell collapses, like genuflecting believers. And she knows this is not escape, just fresh air, gushing ahead of her own death. So the thing with oracles is that, you know, because they know what's going to happen, there's really no reason to fight it. Even if it looks like it's something you should, you know, perhaps pursue or chase or do whatever. This will give you an idea a little more about what the book is actually really about. This is actually, it should be in italics, I guess. The title of the poem is Who Knew, which has become kind of a famous two-word response to stuff that happens on your watch. Deep inside him, the monster is still puzzled. Who knew? The national health care would be tough. Who knew? You could kill a country with some words made of pixels. Or nationalism was so divisive. Or scapegoats would bite back. Who knew the little girl thrown in the river wouldn't float like a handful of petals? Shrugging its shambles towards the Capitol, the ghosts of many innocent children in his wake. So there's a reference to Frankenstein in there as well. At least the movie. Now this one that I'll read is titled Dear Jeff, which at the time when I wrote this was the Attorney General was Jeff Sessions. When you smile, your lucky smile. I see them, you know, all those broken children in your cages. People whose ancestors came down through this land following migratory animal spirits, while your ancestors were a world away. In that grimacing grin of yours, Jeff, the untreated pox-ridden children are weeping, and you wear your bloody executioner's mask. Harvesting the asylum seekers, people so scared of their own deaths in their own countries, that your torture is still a better choice? What is it about the poor and powerless that makes you smile like that? A death's grin. Do you watch as they suffer? Are you watching now? When you tell your lies on TV, do you see the dying? When you see your coyote into Congress and claim you can't recall, are you replaying the dust children who are crying for their mothers? Jeff, tell me what the pharaohs sounded like when they laughed in their Bible of yours. Or what tone the devil took with Jesus in the desert. People always assign too much gravitas to the fallen angel's voice, where I imagine your voice a bit ephemeral and effeminate, insisting within that good book of yours, the cruelty you inflict on innocence is something Christ would do. Jeff, tonight thousands of people are wailing in your cages while the guards threaten and menace in your name, in my name, in the name of an America I wish you'd never been born in. So there's that. Let's see. I'm going to look for, actually, this was an ekphrastic poem I did for the landscape with all the famous painting. I do a lot of ekphrastic work, by the way. So just, it's a prompt. After everything is all splash and spray, after we cover up our conspiracy, hide the evidence of our collusion, how we spent supplies, wax, wood, birds, feathers, needles, and threads. After we went back to working the good work, God's work, herding the sheep, plowing the land, after he influenced, after and being influenced, after he flew above the law, but couldn't stop there, still wanted more, wanted to be the king of everything, even of God. After he was carried out by the tides, we returned to our God once. We unfocused our incivility, waiting for the next traveling salesman who had an easy way out, the fast cure to the way the world does us, to all we were born to endure. Let's see. How much time do I have? I'm terrible.
You can read us 2 more poems, or as many as you would like.
Okay, all right. I think I'll do, yeah, I think I'll read this one. This is, my father is a Oracle. Oftentimes, he's been gone for almost 20 years, but he sticks with me. And I always hear his wisdom, his little weird little isms that he used to impart. He was a good guy. He always challenged us kids to think, to really come up with different solutions than the given ones. Answer me this, Father, as you stood in your planted field, as the first hail smashed the ground, as the twister tore and writhed, when you saw it all reflected in your lake. Did you see a different life for yourself? What do you think gets ruined first now? Behind you, a shingle lifts from the roof like a single prophetic leaf. The stoic face of my dad, wind pushing his fading hair around. Come on, Dad, decide what you'd like to go and change. Make a different outcome. The way you tell it, you lived a lifetime in the root cellar, in the darkness, cracks of light as boards were bowed but held. You and the space where carrots and potatoes were to be held while outside the roots of the future were pounded by fists of ice. Now that you are dead and have no use for it, tell me everything I don't know about regret yet. And he had, towards the end of his life, he had bought a ranch in Texas, and he had this dream of himself of planting a field of crops, harvesting and doing all these things. And the crops had just come up, and there was a sudden tornado and hailstorm that just pulverized the entire thing, which is just futility at its perfect. And he had sold, everything, which, again, I can laugh because it's been, 25 years since he did that. All right, I will. There is another oracle, Plutonian. Obviously, Pluto is the temple that where he was practicing. Beneath the tangle of pomegranate branches, trying to reach the moon, I drifted into the valleys of sleep, near the dead and near dead, and came to rest beside a small pond. It's been more than a year that I've been ill, since the first night of visions, the night that writers were labeled enemies of the state. And I remember the words of friends from totalitarian regimes who told me American poets were soft. They'd never been raided at 3 a.m., taken to a dank cell and beaten to confess whatever was in need of confession. Too easy to be an American writer, and they all hoped it would stay that way, now that they were granted asylum here. And I thought about my friends with black sacks on their heads, cuffed and tossed into vans. The fear they told me about never knowing who you'll see or when ever again. And how all Your notebooks and journals will be gone to be used as evidence of your criminal thoughts. And you will hear each friend say, now you will write. Any way you can, you will write. In your head, on the walls, in dirt, in sand if you must, you will write. Get one word out. Wake the sleeping people. Write their anthem. That was two.
Wow, JP, these are fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing them with us. One thing that I would ask you right now is, could you kindly read out a few titles from the table of contents?
Sure.
I think this is a beautifully titled book. So.
Oh, thank you. So each one of the section titles steals a phrase or a line from one of the poems within that section. So I Became the Thing is from the Oracle of Trophonius, which is the first poem, and it's actually the only poem in that section. And then the next section is Already Forgotten, and then the poems within that section are Early Warning System, Oracle of Rust, Inward Oracle, Oracle of Vanity, Oracle of the Cut, My Father is Oracle, Oracle of the Black Butterflies, Oracle of the Virga Fields, Oracle of Seeds, the Oracle of Garbage, Blind Oracles with Birds, the Oracle of Article 5, Oracle with Flamingo Companion, the Small People. And then the next section is Gold-Plated Promises, and there's the Oracle of Failure, Rule Oracles, the Oracle of Warranties, Hillary Clinton as Cassandra, Oracle of Entertainment Tonight, and then the next section, which is the long section, Lost All Sense, Whole, Oracle of Obstruction, Oracle of Collusion, Pre-existing, Oracle of Confederate Statues. There was a time for one more racial slur in the ceremony to honor the last code talkers. The Oracle of Tender Shelters. Remember, manifestly unqualified, Oracle of Wounded Earth. After school special with armed teachers, nationalism, the Oracle of Amerika First, Oracle of Tribalism, Oracle of Witch Hunts, Dear Jeff, Homunculus, Adam West, featured lullaby in a zinky landscape, how to build a monster, who knew, the Oracle of Liar Liar, landscape with the fall of Icarus, the stirring, unmistakable patriotism of the Velociraptor, and then the final section is You Will Know Smoke, and the poems are Autumnal Oracle, Oracle of the Late Waking, Oracle's End, Blind Prophets, Gacella Patriotic Traders, Oracle of Plutonian, The Last Vision of Cassandra, Great Again, and Oracle of Recurring Oracles.
Thank you, Oracle JP Dancing Bear. Thank you, Oracle Bear. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on Accents and reading for our listeners and viewers. Appreciate
Oh, happy to do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely happy to do it. Thank you. It's nice. So I don't think probably we didn't say because it was before we started recording, but you were a guest on my show, what, like, was it 10 years ago?
Yeah, It's been 10 years ago, and I've been wanting to interview you for that long too. And I also took a pause from my show, so it's wonderful when the stars line up and you can be part of it.